Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today. It's Mr. Éamonn Mac Aodha. Éamonn Mac Aodha is my name. Tá fáilteoirí webinar show. Delighted to welcome you to what is the third in a series of webinars that we have put together on EU jobs, focusing really on today opportunities for Irish language lawyer-linguists and proofreaders in the European Union. Our first webinar looked at EU traineeships in the European Commission and the European Parliament. And our second, which was timed to coincide with St. Bridget's Day, focused on Irish women in the EU institutions. These webinars have been uploaded and you can watch them on YouTube EU Jobs account whenever you wish to. Here at the PermRep, we are always pleased to be in touch with Irish citizens who have an interest in EU careers and those who have chosen to get some experience in EU affairs at an early stage in their careers. Now, actually, more than ever, Ireland's future prosperity is inextricably linked with our EU membership. Ireland, with our EU partners, have embarked on a journey to define and reshape the future of Europe. And a priority for us for the years to come is to expand our footprint in the EU institutions, to have as many Irish citizens as possible working in the EU. With Brexit now complete, Ireland is now the main source of native English speakers in the EU. But critically, in addition, Ireland is in an important place because Irish is becoming a full working language of the EU on the 1st of January next. There has never been a greater opportunity or need for Irish people to join the institutions. And that gives you all the chance for any Irish person who has a very good standard of Irish and another European language to get a good place in the European Union institutions. And to reflect this demand, EBSO have launched a lawyer-linguist competition for permanent positions within the Council of the European Union, the European Commission and the European Parliament. And the closing date for that competition is the 23rd of February. There's also an Irish language proofreader competition which is expected to open for applications on the 18th of February. And we're going to provide you with more details on these competitions during the course of this webinar. Furthermore, the Court of Justice of the European Union will be launching a campaign looking for Irish language speakers to work as lawyer-linguists and translators under a temporary contract. And that's also a great opportunity to join an institution, and it's an ideal learning ground to pass a concours to seek permanency and permanent positions when they become available. The Department of Foreign Affairs provides supports to Irish citizens applying for jobs in the EU at every stage of the process, including online practice, packs and one-to-one training, depending on the competition stage. So there's a range of opportunities that we make available to you there. And it's our hope that the supports and actions that will flow from our new EU jobs strategy will also ensure that a new generation of Irish graduates go on to have successful careers in the EU, as so many Irish people have done in the past. Please get in contact with us if you're applying for EU posts at eujobs@dfa.ie. The DFA EU Jobs website has much practical advice for people interested in a career with the EU institutions, and I'd encourage everyone to visit that site. I wish you the very best of success if you pursue opportunities in the EU institutions. And I want to thank in advance today our three guest speakers. Anne-Claire Gathoye joins us from EBSO, the European Personnel Selection Office, where she has been working for the past 10 years. She is currently in the External Communications Unit as a project manager, and her daily work consists of promoting selection procedures and career opportunities to all kinds of audience. And I know from Anne-Claire's CV that she's also worked around the whole issue of assessment centres, so perhaps we get some good insights from her in that regard as well. Our second guest today is Jennifer Moore, an Irish language lawyer-linguist working for the European Parliament in Brussels. And our third and final guest will be Christopher Finn, an Irish language proofreader working for the Publications Office in the EU in Luxembourg. Anne-Claire Gathoye will present the key steps of the recruitment process for the Irish language lawyer-linguists and proofreaders. And she'll also mention briefly other opportunities available for Irish citizens in the EU. Jennifer Moore and Christopher Finn will then introduce themselves and give us an insight on their career journeys. Once their presentations start, you will have a chance to ask them your own questions through the Slido platform by going to the web page sli.do and using the code EU jobs to access the system. You don't have to sign up, anyone can do it. The information will also appear in the video description. Look, it's a great pleasure to welcome all three of you today, our guest speakers. Let's get started. I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, Anne-Claire Gathoye, to begin her presentation. Anne-Claire, over to you.
Thank you so much for this. So indeed, I'm very pleased to be invited and to have the opportunity to tell you about some very specific career opportunities, specifically open to Irish people indeed. But first, a very brief word about what we do at EPSO. It's the European Personal Selection Office. So indeed, we deal with selections, not really recruitment, because at the end of selections, you end up on a reserve list of successful candidates, and later only the HR, the Human Resources Services, will get you a job in line with your competencies. So our mission is only to organize selections, and that's what I'm going to explain to you today. So we organize selections for these 10 main institutions and bodies of the EU. So, you know, the Parliament, the Council, the Commission, Court of Auditors, Court of Justice, External Action Service, Committee of the Regions, European Social Committee, the Ombudsman, and the European Data Protection Supervisor, mainly for those 10, but sometimes also for other institutions or agencies. And, you know, most of the jobs are based in Brussels or Luxembourg, so you should be ready to move to one of those places if you want to work with us. But we also have offices and delegations and representations all around the world, and so perhaps after a couple of years in the headquarters in Brussels or Luxembourg, you can also find a job somewhere else. We also have research centers, including in Ireland, by the way, but I don't have much time to tell you much more about it. I think you can just Google that and find information yourselves. So we offer a lot of nice opportunities and advantages if you work with us. First of all, shaping Europe together is the motto we've developed lately, last year or 2 years ago, to explain the fact that actually if you work for the EU, you will not work for the profit of a company, but you will work for the benefit of about 450 million European citizens, and that's something I really appreciate. I've worked in private companies before, but I think this human dimension and the dimension of delivering a service to citizens is something I really, really love. Also, another thing I really love in this place is that it's an international working environment. So you get a chance to meet and speak and discover people from 27 member states with different cultures, backgrounds, stories, histories. And it's really something unique, I think. You don't find this in every place, in every company. Moreover, you get to work, well, to do an interesting and challenging work. You tackle the issues that you hear about in the news every day. And the job is really meaningful. If you're looking for something important and meaningful, really, it's the place to be, definitely. In addition, our employer takes really good care of us. They encourage us to keep developing and learning throughout the career. So you can follow courses on pretty much everything: language courses, IT, skill, personal development, many topics throughout your career during working hours, free of charge, so also quite unique, I think. We also have a nice work-life balance, so we can work part-time, for instance. Well, nowadays we all work from home, so we can adjust our time works, let's say, or working times rather. Sorry, I'm not a native speaker. We also have a nice job mobility policy, so it means that you can start your career in one place or do one job, and after a few years change completely, either jobs or institutions. Actually, this is one of the last presentations I'm giving today, because in 2 weeks I will move to the Committee of the Regions to still work in communication, but another job. So it's a bit sad, but at the same time I chose it, and it's an opportunity. It's also quite unique, I think, to have so many job opportunities within the same employer, and that's something I really appreciate too. And then we have quite a lot of well-being initiatives, but maybe if you want to know more, get in touch with me on LinkedIn and I will tell you more. Now, who are we looking for? Well, pretty much everyone. I mean, we're looking for all kinds of profiles all year round. Today, we're going to focus more specifically on linguistic profiles, so lawyer-linguists, and proofreaders who are linguistic assistants. But you see, we are also throughout the year looking for economists, lawyers, scientists, all kinds of profiles really. And how do you get a job with us? Well, first of all, the first step is to go to our website. So either you Google EU careers or EPSO, and you will end up on this page, and you can check either on the job opportunities tab, or generally when the competition is open, you have a direct link on the homepage. So at the moment, lawyer-linguists, also contract staff. I will tell you a word about this other opportunity a bit later on, because actually there are two big types of selection. The one that gives access to a permanent post, we call it competition or concours. Maybe you're familiar with the French term. And then the contract agent selections, which give access to contracts of 3 years that you can renew once. So that's to be covered a bit later on. Let's start with competitions. To become an official, a permanent official or civil servant at the institutions. And within this type of competition, you will see that we have two types of staff. So we have the assistants, which we label as AST because we love acronyms. I'm sorry, so sometimes it's a bit confusing, but I will try to be as clear as I can. Or the administrators, which we label also as AD. Administrators require a university degree. You need at least a bachelor degree to apply for those selections. Whereas for assistants, it's not required, but of course it's okay if you have one. It's my case, actually. I studied languages at university, and I applied for an assistant competition. And now I'm an assistant. Well, I'm a project manager actually in communication, but I'm still an assistant, but which is absolutely fine. So there are very nice jobs as assistants too. The main difference is that you, as an assistant, you start at level 1, and every 3 years on average, you gain one step. You go one step higher. So you become a AST2, then AST3, and you can go to AST9. Whereas when you're an administrator, an AD, you start immediately your career at level 5, and you can go up to level 16. So it's a faster career. You can go higher too, and of course the salary is a bit different. But I mean, from grade 5, AST or AD have the same salary. Yeah? And now we show you the numbers of salaries in a few slides. So stay with me. Coming soon or ongoing at the moment, we're looking for lawyer linguists, as you heard, in different languages. So these are people with a degree in law who can translate from 2 EU languages into one of those that you see mentioned here. So Polish, Hungarian, Gaelic, Irish, French, Czech or Bulgarian. So we will stick, of course, we will concentrate on the Gaelic profile today. And later, normally next week, we should publish a new competition for proofreaders or language editors. This is the grade AST3. AST3 will probably require some years of experience in the field. I will come back to that. AD7, I told you the entry grade is normally of young graduates without work experience is AD5. And generally AD7 means that you need 6 years of experience. But this time, strangely enough and happily enough, it's not the case. You can apply even if you don't have any work experience in the field, but you need a degree in law. In Irish law, more specifically for you, in your case. And then you see we will have more other competitions, rather specific and specialized competitions throughout the year. We publish many, so keep an eye on our website or on our social media for more details. So now let's look at specifically the selection for lawyer linguists. We will look for 10 Irish laureates. And in Irish, but other numbers in other languages, but let's really concentrate on what's important and interesting for you. So for this competition, you will need to have a knowledge of 3 languages. Irish must be your language 1, and you must be fluent in this language, so a level C2. And the other 2, you must have a very thorough knowledge of those languages too. Language 2 must be English, and language 3 can be any of the other EU languages. So not English, not Irish, but any other EU language is fine at level C1. Oh yes, and you have to apply until the 23rd of February. Mind you, I will go back for a second on our website. You have to create an EPSO account and fill in your application online, and it doesn't take 5 minutes. So don't wait until the very last day, because applications close generally at 12 Brussels time. And you will have to fill in a number of pages, so don't do it on the very last day in the morning. I mean, Okay, so it will be in 3 steps. So step 1 are the computer-based tests, or CBT, because we love acronyms, I told you. So in this first step, you will have to go to sit some reasoning tests. So verbal reasoning, numerical reasoning, abstract reasoning, very classic. I won't spend much time on this. You can find some examples on our website, or if you Google reasoning tests, you will find plenty of them also online. These tests will be in Irish. And then you have another test, also an MCQ test, a language comprehension test in English. If you then obtained one of the best scores in those computer-based tests, and if you if you meet all the eligibility criteria set up in the notice of competition, which I have not mentioned yet, but I will explain in a second, then you will be invited for the second step. Actually, you remember I told you this is a competition. It's a concours in French. So it means that not everybody will win, and you need to be the best among the best at each step to be selected. So we are looking for 10 successful candidates at the end of the selection. And for this second stage, we will keep 7 to 8 times the number of laureates or successful candidates. So we will invite the 70 to 80 best candidates to this step 2. For each competition, including this one, you will find our website, what we call a notice of competition. It's the official journal of the EU. This is a very interesting document, but it's a bit dry because it's written by lawyers, meaning that every sentence, every comma counts. And it's very important that you read it carefully, because this is the legal document that explains all the requirements you need to meet in order to apply for this competition. So in terms of diploma, sometimes work experience, not in this case, but it happens that you need some experience. In terms of languages, it will also describe, for instance, for this stage 1, how many questions in each test, how much time you have, what's the pass mark. So all the details that I don't have the time to cover here in this short presentation will be described in this legal document, the notice of competition. So make sure you read it carefully and you meet all the requirements before you apply. Now, so I told you, if you're among the best at the first reasoning test and language comprehension test, you will be invited to this step 2, where you will have to translate a legal text without a dictionary from English to Irish, and you have 2 hours to do that. Now, if you are among the best again for this, for this translation test, you will be invited to the final stage, the assessment center. And this time we will keep maximum 4 times the number of laureates we are looking for. So we're looking for 10 laureates, I told you. So here we will invite maximum 40 people. At this stage, we will test your 3 languages, so Irish, English, and the 3rd language you have chosen. We will assess your field-related competency, so your knowledge in Irish law, your ability to translate, and also some general competencies that I will show you on the next slide. You will have namely 2 interviews, a situational competency-based interview. That is what used to be a group exercise. We used to have 6 candidates from the same competition around the table, and they were interacting together. They had to solve a problem together. But of course, nowadays, the assessment center is totally online. You don't have to come to Brussels anymore, and you don't meet other candidates from the same competition. So we had to come up with a new way of assessing candidates, and the situational competency-based interview is some kind of interactive test, like a role play if you want. You will receive a scenario, work-related scenario, 2-3 weeks before your assessment center day. And you will have the time to analyze this little file. And then on the day, you will meet one of my colleagues who will play the role of your colleague and ask you some questions about work-related situations. And then besides this interaction with my colleague, you will have selection board members or jury members observing your interaction with my colleague in your role play, and they will make notes and yes, assess your behavior. Then you will have another more classic interview about some general competencies, where the selection board will ask you, for instance, questions about your past, like can you give us an example of a situation where you had difficulties dealing with someone, or a big success, very classic situations, I would say. These 2 interviews take place in language 2, that is in English. Besides this, you will also have to make a short oral presentation. So you receive a little booklet with a, well, it will be sent to you also online. A little booklet with a situation you have to summarize in 10 minutes. Well, you have 30 minutes to prepare, and then you give a summary in 10 minutes to the selection board. That's in language 1. So in Irish, you have to speak Irish for that. And then last exercise for the assessment center, you will have to write a summary in Irish of a text that you will receive in your language 3, and again without a dictionary. So all the details, the times and everything, they are described in the notice of competition. Sorry, I'm going too fast. So the 8 competencies, the general competencies that will be assessed during the assessment center are those: your ability to analyze and solve problems, to communicate, to deliver quality and results, to learn and develop, to prioritize and organize your work, to cope with stress, to work in teams, and your potential to lead as well. Now, that was for lawyer-linguists very briefly. Now, let's have a look at another competition coming soon for proofreaders. So this time, it's an assistant level. We're looking for 18 Irish laureates. And for this one, since it's an assistant, it's a bit less demanding than the AD at the administrator's position. So you only need to know 2 languages and not 3. Language 1 must still be Irish, and you must be fluent in this one. And language 2 can be English or French. You have the choice. And you don't need a C1 level for that, but a B2 will be enough, because, you know, it's a AST assistant position. It's a bit easier, let's say. Although sometimes it attracts more candidates, so not necessarily easier. It starts exactly the same way, more or less, I would say, because you will have, again, 3 reasoning tests of verbal, numerical, and abstract reasoning, and language comprehension test, but all of those are in Irish. If you remember, for the lawyer linguist, the language comprehension test was in English. But here, all 4 tests will be in Irish. It's again on computer, so you can either go to a test center or you can do it online. Then in this case, you will be monitored. You will have to show your room to someone. Well, all the details will be communicated to you if you do it from home. The step 2 is not an intermediate test, a translation test like in the previous one, but it's the selection board, the jury members who will work for this step 2. They will assess what we call your talent screener. So when you register for the competition, when you fill in your application online, you will have to fill a series of questions in your application with questions relevant to the competitions. For instance, they will ask you questions about your diplomas, your work experience, or field-related questions. For instance, do you know any tool, or do you have any experience in using editing tools or correction tools, you know, because it's a proofreading job, and there are specific tools for that kind of job. So they will ask you if you know some of those tools. You don't have to answer yes to all questions, it's okay, but you will get points for every question. And the selection board then will evaluate all the questionnaire, and then the best, or the people with the highest scores in this section, talent screener, will be invited for the next step. So that's in language 2, so in English or French in this case. And then if you meet all the eligibility requirements set in the notice of competition, which I love so much, and if you have one of the best scores in the talent screener, then you will be invited to the assessment center. And here we will invite maximum 3 times the number of laureates or successful candidates we are looking for. So maximum 54 people, because we're looking for 18 laureates in this case. For this test, there will be actually, for this part, there will be 2 written tests. So there will be a case study in language 2, so it can be analyzing a test, giving a recommendation. I don't have the details yet because the notice of competition is not out at this stage. And then a field-related test, which will be a proofreading and correcting of a text in language 1, so in Irish. You will have to annotate the tests and explain why you are correcting like this, including, yes, grammar, punctuation, everything, again, explained very detailed in the notice of competition, my best friend, it seems. And then further than this, you will have also 2 interviews. So the situational competency-based interview which is like the role play I explained earlier, in language 2. So all these tests are in language 2, so English or French, except the field-related test in language 1. And then the general competency-based interview, exactly the same as for the lawyer-linguists before, except that for assistants, we do not assess your potential to lead. So we assess only 7 general competencies and not 8, like in the previous example. If you're then among the best again at this stage, you are on the list of successful candidates. Congratulations. You will receive vacancies in your EPSO account, so the one you created at the very beginning. You will have a job interview, and then you will be recruited by the EU institutions. I will very, very briefly still give you some information about other types of, the salaries. Maybe you are interested in that. So I remind you, the proofreaders are level AT3, so this is their salary. And the lawyer-linguists are AD7, so this is the salary. These are gross salaries from which you should deduct between 15 and 20% of taxes. But if you are an expat, so if you don't live in Brussels or Luxembourg yet and you come and settle there, we will give you an expatriation allowance of, let's go back for a second, of 16%. So if you deduct this little tax and you add the expatriation allowance, the gross becomes the net, more or less. It's just to give you an idea. Contract agents, I mentioned that at the beginning, these are people who can get 3 years contract that you can renew once. We have all those profiles open and open permanently. That's why we call it cast permanent, not because it's a permanent position, but because you can permanently apply for them. So it's just the same system. You fill in your application online anytime. You don't have a deadline for that. And every 6 months, you have to click the button renew interest. Otherwise, your application disappears. Well, I mean, is not erased, but is not visible anymore by the recruiters. And this is a bit different in the sense that you are not automatically invited for tests, but you have to be pre-selected by recruiting services first. So every month they look at their urgent needs and they pre-select some people in the database. And if you are pre-selected, then you will be invited for 2 tests. Again, some reasoning tests in verbal, numerical, abstract reasoning. In language 1, which can be any EU language, it can be Irish or any other. And then a competency test, so it's your knowledge in the field. So in one of the fields, for instance, in childcare staff, in law, in translation, whatever. Language 2 must be English, French, or German and must be different than language 1. The good piece of news is that you don't need to be among the best. You just need a pass mark for those tests. And then you have an interview with the recruiting service that selected you. And then if you are the best at the interview, you are recruited for 3 years. If you need more details, I can answer your questions later. Salaries are a bit lower. You should look for function group 3 or 4 because 1 is manual workers, 2 are secretaries, and then rather look for positions in function group 3 or 4, which are rather like high-level assistant or administrators. Now, very, very briefly, I promise 1 minute on traineeships. There are also opportunities if you want to do some traineeships. All institutions organize one. The biggest one is the one from the European Commission. They take 900 trainees twice a year, so it's actually the largest traineeship scheme in the world. But I cannot give you the details of each of them because, of course, you see there are so many. I don't know them all. So just a very brief one. You can find them all on our website. If you go to Job Opportunities Traineeship, you reach this page, and then you click the place you want to have your traineeship, scroll down, and you will have all the details. But briefly, for the Commission, so the biggest one, you have to apply within the deadline. It's twice a year. Next time you can apply is in July. You need a bachelor degree in any field. You need to know at least 2 EU languages, and one of them must be English, French, or German. You can apply even if you are not an EU citizen. It's not the case for competitions. For jobs, either contract agent jobs or official jobs, you need an EU citizenship. And you must not have worked for more than 6 weeks in another institution. So you cannot do 2 traineeships, basically. Now, that's all for me. I will leave the floor for your questions and further testimonials from my colleagues. I would just, one thing, copy this link into the chat. If you would be kind enough to click this link and reply to 3 very short questions a small poll. It's anonymous. You don't have to. It's up to you. But it would be very nice of you. So enough from me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Anne-Claire. I've been dealing with EU jobs now for about 4 years, and you, I have to say, did a marvelous job in demystifying what can be a complex enough procedure and in presenting it in really lucid terms. So you've done us a great service here, and I think you've kicked us off really well. I suppose in a sense, what you were doing was telling us how to get there. And the next part of the presentation is really going to be about what it's like when you're there. I guess that's what we're trying to look at now. And to do that, I'm joined by Jennifer and Christopher. Before kicking off a conversation with Jennifer, can I remind you that if you do want to put questions, and I see a couple are already up, you can do so using Slido. That's sli.do, and EU jobs is the password for that. So feel free to put those up. I propose to take the questions all together at the end of the remaining 2 conversations. We'll do a little Q&A then. But look, let's get talking, Jennifer. Tell me a little bit maybe about your own education background, your qualifications, kind of what you did before coming to where you are now. And I should have said, I think we flagged it at the beginning, but Jennifer is an Irish language lawyer-linguist at the European Parliament. So Jennifer, maybe you'd answer that question to kick us off.
Hi, Eamon, and thank you very much for inviting me here to speak today. I started off with a bachelor's degree in Leith University in law and Spanish. It was a 4-year degree, and it included 1 year on Erasmus in Spain, in Salamanca. So I suppose that was my first taste of living on the continent or living abroad. After my degree, I did a master's in translation studies in DCU. And the same year I enrolled in the course in King's Inns in lawyer-linguistics and legal translation. In my final year, or during my master's, towards the end of my master's, I applied for a traineeship in the European Parliament in Luxembourg in the translation section, but I was unsuccessful with my application. So I proceeded to try and get some work experience in law offices in Ireland. And then I applied again for a traineeship, and this time I was successful, and that was in Luxembourg. So in October 2017, I embarked on a 6-month traineeship there. And on the back of that, I was offered a 1-year contract as a translator. At the same time, I had started the EPSO competition for lawyer-linguists, because what I really wanted was to be a lawyer-linguist. And after a year as a translator, and at the end of that year, the reserve list was published for the EPSO competition, and I was successful, and that's how I ended up as a lawyer-linguist. And I started in Brussels in my current role in November 2019.
Thanks, Jennifer. Maybe you could talk us through a little bit. What kind of motivated you to look for a job initially in Luxembourg and then in Brussels? What made you want to go that route?
Well, during college, I always had a keen interest in EU law and in European affairs, and I thought that that would be a great career path for me. I also have a really strong interest in languages, and it's one of my strong points. So I thought that a career in the EU institutions was a great way of combining both. And I went to a career guidance counsellor in my final year in college because I wasn't sure exactly what path to take or how I could go about that. And that's where I first heard the term lawyer-linguist, and I began researching then how to get there and what kind of what was involved in the role. And then that's why I enrolled in the Masters in Translation in the course in King's Inns. And then I think that was my main motivation, really. It's a unique opportunity that I don't think is really offered in Ireland, where I can combine my law skills along with my language skills in the same role.
Thanks, Jennifer. And speaking of that role, maybe you could describe for us a little bit what your current role is. Maybe talk us through what a typical day, if there is such a thing, looks like, or if there isn't, maybe tell us what you did, for example, yesterday in your work life. Give us a sense of what's going on day to day.
Well, what's essential to our role really is ensuring that the Irish language version of EU legislation, regulations or directives is exactly the same as the original drafted version, which is drafted in English. So we will go through the text with a fine-tooth comb and ensure that the Irish version is exactly the same. After it's been politically negotiated, the lawyer-linguists in the English section make changes to the text to ensure that it's clear, and then we would put those changes into the Irish text, and we would check that all the terms are exactly the same, that they correspond to legislation that's previously in place. A typical day, well, at the moment, the workload is quite heavy and it involves going to a lot of meetings. When you're assigned a file, you would follow the file through the whole legislative process, and you would attend meetings between the council, the parliament and the commission, and that would help you to get to know the file and to know exactly what's being agreed and what the political will is and what they want in the legislation. And then when it's fully decided, so I attended a meeting this week and it was the final technical meaning of a file, so now that will be passed on to us and we will go through it and check that it's clear, that the English language reflects exactly what it's supposed to mean, and just improve the text in general.
What would you say is kind of the most rewarding aspect of the job that you do today?
I find it very rewarding to be working on legislation that affects the lives of millions of Europeans in all European countries. I think I also find it rewarding to be working on issues that affect society today, things that you might hear about in the news, and then you're working on legislation that reflects those issues, or on legislation that's being put in place to counteract whatever it may be. It can be so varied. You can be working on something from tires to fisheries to money laundering. And I also find it rewarding to be working through the Irish language and to see the Irish language being given an official status, and that the Irish version is given the same status as the other 22 official languages of the European Union. And I find it quite rewarding to be working through Irish.
In terms of fitting into that role, were there other Irish language colleagues you could go to, sound off a little bit, touch base with? Did you have those kind of supports? How was it as an onboarding exercise, as they say? What was it like to get started in that social sense?
Getting started, it was a very welcoming environment. You're straight into the Irish team, and in the Parliament there are 3 lawyer-linguists on each language team and 2 assistants. So there's 5 of us all together in the Irish unit, and they were very supportive. I was assigned a mentor, so that was another lawyer-linguist, and he taught me through how to go through a file and a document whenever you would be assigned one. Everyone seemed very open to answering questions. And I think in a small team, it's very easy to integrate. When a team is so small, you get to know everyone quite quickly. And luckily, I had a few months before the pandemic hit, so I had time in the office, because I think now it might be a little bit more difficult, but there has been a lot of new colleagues over the past year, and they seem to be integrating quite well too, not in the Irish unit, but in other language teams.
Thanks. Maybe one last question. If I was to say to you, what is the single most important piece of advice that you would give to someone thinking of applying for your job in the EU institutions, what would that be?
Well, one thing I would say is don't be disheartened if you're not successful in your first application. As I said, I applied for a traineeship and I wasn't successful the first time. And I also applied for the EPSO a couple of times before I finally was successful. So I would say don't be disheartened, and see it as a learning curve if you're not successful this time. And then if you do apply, I would say definitely do study. I think some people are under the impression that you can't study for the computer-based tests, but you really can. And I studied quite a lot for my competition, and I enrolled in a course online, but there's so many that you can practice, and it'll just help you to get used to the timing, and you can improve with the numerical reasoning and the abstract reasoning by getting used to the kind of questions they're asked and practicing them.
That's very true.
Okay,
if I may just interrupt you for a second. Indeed, if you want to train for these reasoning tests, you can really improve your performance. And someone asked on Slido if we have some sample tests, including in Irish. Yes, we do on our website. So if you want later, if you have time, I can share my screen again and show you the website. But if you go basically to how to apply the sample test, and then you will have to click around a bit, but you will find them. There are some examples. And also one thing, we don't have a blacklist of people who fail, so you can try again many times, no problem. I failed myself a few times. I also know colleagues who made it at their first attempt. I don't be discouraged at all. That's not my point. But I mean, you can fail once and try again. It's not a problem at all.
Thank you, Anne-Claire. Agus grimíle maith Jennifer asocht an chuir láthir sin agus asocht na ceisna sin a reigert tá don bhuíochtit. Beidir is go raibh a raig go láram with le Christopher. Christopher Finn, an Irish language proofreader in the EU Publications Office in Luxembourg. Christopher, maybe I could begin by asking the same thing. What was your own educational background, and what was it that you did essentially before you took the role you're in now?
Yeah, so thanks a million for having me, and it's an honor and a privilege to be here. I did a bachelor's degree in French and Irish translation, so linn and in Dlítheangeolaí Gaeilge. And that involved 1 year of being on Erasmus in France. So I went to Poitiers in France, which again, like Jennifer, not only was it the first time for me to move abroad, it was the first time for me to move out of my house. So that came with great independence. And during that year, I developed like a real fondness for Europe, for the continent, for traveling. I think that's really something that's set my sights on living in Europe, living in the continent after my degree. Then I went back to my final year where we had a lot of projects to do in Irish translation. We learned a lot of different skills such as subtitling, proofreading, editing, focused on different fields such as law, but also focused on different things like primary school, secondary school books. So there was a real emphasis on translation and proofreading as itself. And then also during the degree, we had a lot of guest speakers come in who were already working in the EU. And that's something that really got us all thinking about working in the EU and kind of got us saying, hey, this is something that we could probably definitely apply for. Then after I finished my degree, I went working in France for a year as a teacher in French university. And then I kind of just applied through the CAST system, and I got through the competition and I got to the Publications Office of the European Union.
Thanks, Christopher. Maybe that takes us to the role of an Irish language proofreader. I mean, could you talk us through what's involved? What does an ordinary day look like for you? That would be really helpful, I think, for those looking in who are considering it.
Yeah. So with being an Irish proofreader, it's not really just looking at the language either. There's a lot of change about it. So obviously you look at the grammar, but you also look at different things like the layout of documents. You make sure that they match the layout of the English document, that the same kind of terms are used all throughout the document, that the vocabulary is the same. We also have a style guide in the EU institutions that we have to put in place. It's sort of like the Kaijon that will be put in place in Ireland with much the same rules, but it's just kind of for certain things, such as things that might be written in Latin, you have to write them in a certain way. When you're referring to regulations, you have to refer to them in a certain way. And we're trying to implement that across all EU institutions to make it, to harmonize it between them. So mostly we get in, sometimes it's short documents, sometimes it's long documents that we just have to read through them, compare them to the English text or the French text that they come in originally, make sure that they match, then compare them to potentially another language like Italian or German, to make sure that everything is sound in all of them versions. And then we'd send them through, and if ever there'd be updates or corrections that would need to be done after the deadline, we'd have to mind them too as well.
what would you describe maybe as the most challenging aspects of the work? Like, what's hard about it?
I suppose the most difficult thing about it might be the short deadlines. The day is quite varied, so sometimes you could go into work and you'd have quite long deadlines, so you'd be able to really take care of the documents, but sometimes you'd receive a document at 9:30 and it'll be due by 11, or 11:30 and it'll be due by 12. That's probably the most challenging thing that you'd have to do, but it's something that you definitely get used to as well. After a little while, even if it sounds daunting at the start, you know what's coming up all the time. You know the sort of things that you need to change, or things that you don't need to change. So it's definitely doable, even if it is quite challenging.
And what would you say, looking at it the other way around, then, what's the most rewarding aspect of it? What do you enjoy most about it?
I think one of the most rewarding things will probably be, sort of like Jennifer said, working in Irish, being part of the group of Irish people that are working, helping promote the Irish language within the EU, making Irish, like every other language of the European Union, making it like an official language, making it seen on the same level as French, English, German. Also being part of a multicultural environment where you have people from all EU states. Even if we're working from home at the moment, it's really interesting and really lovely to see people from different countries, to see how they act, to see what they do, to see how they tackle things. It's a constant learning curve, and I think that's definitely really rewarding.
Yeah, that's a very interesting angle to it. Factor them will do more buint leis an gné a bhaineann leis an post a bhaineann leis an tanga féin agus a bheith I Lorna Eorpach ag Dlítheangeolaí Gaeilge agus le Gaeilge factor dom gúil sin simúl mar gné den post. And what would you say, again, it's a question I asked Jennifer, the single most important piece of advice that you might give to someone thinking of applying for your job in the institution, a job like yours, what would you say to them?
I think I'd probably say, just off the application on its own, as Anne-Claire mentioned earlier, just be prepared. It is quite long. It does take a very long time for it to fill it in correctly, to go through all of the steps. Then again, during the recruitment process, the EU likes administration. They like finding out a lot of documents. They like receiving a lot of documents. So if you could prepare in that sense, in terms of the application, the recruitment, just be prepared to know that it will take a long time, but that it's definitely worth it in the end, even if you want to pull your hair out. If they ask you for a document that you haven't seen for 5 years, it's definitely worth it, and to keep up with it.
If I may intervene again, because
Please,
there was
sure.
a question about how long the whole process takes. Well, it takes a long time. It takes like 9 to 10 months, or sometimes even more, because last year everything was put on hold, so we had even more delay. But from the moment we open applications till the moment you really get the results or you get a job, it can take really up to almost a year. And so someone also asked if once you're on the list of successful candidates and I mentioned you still have an interview with the recruiting service, is it still very competitive? Not really, because they will call you, like for any job, they will call you together with 2 or 3 other candidates or successful candidates. So it's not a big competition, but it's still one. But don't worry, because once you're on the reserve list of successful candidates, at some point you will get called for a job. So yeah, I hope this answers those 2 questions.
Thank you very much, agus gur maith freisin, Christopher. I think we're kind of into Q&A already, and Claire has helpfully picked up a few of the questions that have been asked on Slido. Let me relay a couple more of those questions. Tá roinnte go ask Gaeilge agus déine meis an trí Gaeilge ar nuig. Ceist den vertigh Christopher agus to Jennifer, beidir Jennifer a dús. An rá áras ar bith agat riamh sular thosaigh tú ag obair sa bhriséil I dtaobh caighdeán do Gaeilge féin de. Sin ceist amháin, agus ceist eile de Jennifer an bhfuil éon ledan agat don chomórtas go háirithe an réasúnacht bhríomhartha agus an tríú aistriúcháin. So maybe starting with Jennifer on those two questions, and then the first question for Christopher after that.
Well, Neil came to Gaeilge gum, so those bhí mé cinál nar bhí seach faoin caidan Gaeilge bhí gum, agus nar cúig mé go Luxembourg dús bhí mé cinál maragach leis an Gaeilge, ach an bhfuair an léiríonn gach duine Gaeilge an tamar fad, agus nar bhí mé an sin for mé anclacht as a bheith caint le gach duine, agus an sin nar thosaíonn tú ag obair trí an Gaeilge, tugann gach with a rash. So agus nar chuireann tú isteach ar an chomórtas, beidh tamil an go dtí go bhéart an céad céim dhéanamh, so tá am agat inis chun snasachar de chuid Gaeilge dearthain. Bhí dar ceist an sin, cén ceist bhí an? Cad éon dar ceist?
An tarna ceist bhí an bhfuil éon ledan agat do riine I dhéobh an chomórtas ach go háirithe I le an réasúnacht bhríomhartha agus an tríú
Just be a clachta, dearthain mar dúirt Claire tá or Anne-Claire tá rudí ar sibh epso agus is trí Gaeilge agus ba ceartid fécint ar sin agus clachta dhéanamh. Maidir leis an tastracán ní féidir leat folklór úsáid a ceap me sé gréis sin goach cos uirint ar bhíon an folklór agat tá an éhraán agus bíon tú a géirí gachfuil a cuairdaach agus an sin caiann tú am. So ó thaobh sin de ceapam actually go sin goach nach bhfuil an folklór agat cos just caiig tú scríomh an rud a tagant chuig de ceann.
Ceist bháin eile duite se le dúirmé an orlór de Christopher on cuasa dhéantu sa King's Inns. Would you recommend that course to someone who is interested in being a lawyer-linguist? That's another question we have.
I would recommend that course because especially if you're not, well, people wouldn't really be familiar with the kind of documents that are translated or the kind of documents you will be working on when you do come to work in the institutions. And in that course, they focus solely on European legislation and European documents, and you get a real feel for the language that's that you translate, the kind of, because the Irish legal language is nearly another language altogether. So I definitely think it was very helpful in becoming familiar with the kind of documents and language that's used.
Christopher, maybe just better focal go fin keshin motherla auras of her dinner rivré motherla level ataku fein on kaidon and mechaku surveil in our sort fushin agus kadanyarfa motherla shin.
Yeah, kincha grow hours can all near a seimineár and Eorpach can all seimineár heft na Rochtaíochta agus an Dlí agus dúirt mé hain can all few most rud galarian to Gaeilge ní honan sin agus bheith an play leis na cinálacha text na sin ach ag an can all chain tú dahier tá sé difriúil ón Gaeilge leabhartha ach níor ho difriúil sin agus can all dúr cosú le Jennifer dearhin má dhéanamh tú clochta sul dhéanamh tú na scrúdathe agus few sort of dusting tú the first can all by ní bhaith fibre hagat agus can all chin on can all mulla bheith hagam.
Gurmagat. Keist an seo, another question for maybe best for Anne-Claire to have a look at this one. Perhaps if you could say a word about, somebody has asked that the deadline is 23rd of February, but their law degree is not completed until June. Can you still apply? That's a question for Anne-Claire.
I was just checking the notes of competition to double check that, but unfortunately, no, it seems you must have a level of education which corresponds to completed university studies at the date of closing of applications. So I'm afraid in this case not. Sorry.
Another question, maybe Anne-Claire, which I might ask you to comment first, but perhaps maybe Jennifer as well. And the question is, do the jobs of lawyer-linguists differ significantly between the various institutions? For example, is it very different to work in the Court of Justice, to the Parliament, to the Commission, etc.? Maybe Anne-Claire, you could offer a view, and we might throw it open to Jennifer as well.
I'm not quite sure because I'm not a lawyer myself. don't have a degree in law, so I guess they have different legislative texts to translate or to deal with if they work in the commission or in the council or in the parliament. But I'm not very much qualified to answer that question. Perhaps Jennifer can know more about that. Sorry.
I know that in the courts that the lawyer-linguists they focus on translation mainly, and that they translate. Their main part of their job is translation, and in the courts you would be translating from French to Irish directly. In the Parliament and in the Council, our roles will be quite similar, and we work together quite a bit. We will be in contact with our counterparts in the Council on a regular basis, and we work on the same documents if they've been decided between the Parliament and the Council. So you would often be talking to the lawyer-linguists in the Irish section in the Council to verify things, and sometimes we have to approve changes that they've made and vice versa. So the role will be quite similar.
Thanks, that's very helpful. There are a couple of other questions. I want to refer maybe specifically to a question we've had around resource practice materials, etc., and what is available in Irish and what isn't available in Irish. Jennifer, I'm going to ask you to comment on this, but I'm going to say in advance of that this is something we're very much aware of, and in my role as the director of the Parliament and Institutions team here at the Permanent Representation, it has come to my attention through a number of different contacts over the last couple of years that there are gaps in what's available. And we only yesterday had a very useful meeting with a number of interested parties around this, and we're looking to see what we can do. Now, I'm afraid for the current competition, we won't have solutions for that. But I'm very hopeful that an issue which seems to have been around for quite a while is amenable to a solution, and we are working on that very closely. So we will roll that out as soon as it is ready. We're at the very early stages of trying to solve it. Jennifer, in terms of what actually is available, and as somebody who was a user of the material, and again, you might take this question in tandem with another which asked, how did you prepare for the first stages of the competition? I think you've partly answered this in Irish, but in particular the CBT and the translation tests, and what resources, again, did you use for the verbal reasoning? There's a whole load of questions in there for you, Jennifer, but have a go at them. Thanks.
Well, I bought a package on a website called EU Training, and yeah, there was very little available in Irish. Other than the EPSO website, there's very little of the CBT training available in Irish, so I had no other choice but to sign up for an English package. But I found that you can still improve and still practice a lot, because the abstract reasoning is kind of language neutral, and the numerical reasoning, it's more maths. Well, the question will be in Irish, but it's not essential. Like, I think you can practice that in any language, to be honest. It's just the verbal reasoning that's not really available in Irish. But it's a combination of all the scores anyway for that section of the test. So I think even doing it through English is helpful, and you would have to study, even if you can't. Well, I couldn't find anything in Irish at the time, so I studied through English for that part of the test. As regards the translation part of the test, I was working as a translator, so that was a great help to me at that point. It's basically doing what you do every day anyway, but just a test. So, but you can do freelance translating, or I think reading in Irish. Try to read as much as you can through Irish, maybe even Irish language newspapers. That would help your level of Irish. As much exposure to the language as you can, I think, is helpful. And was there a third question?
Well, I think you've covered a lot of the ground there. There is a question which maybe Christopher might be able to help us on here. Is there any official training course for Irish proofreading, or do you need to train as a translator and move into proofreading at a later time? That's a question for you, Christopher, if you can cast any light on that.
Yeah, so before I came into the position that I'm in at the moment, I had a little bit of experience as a proofreader, but not that much apart from what I studied. So most of the training that I've gotten, I've actually gotten it on site. Well, from home. But honestly, something about Irish resources being online. I kind of noticed that too when I was applying and doing different stages of the competition. Something that I used, that I'm not sure if it would work for everyone, is the official journal of the European Union on Eurelex. So with the Irish derogation, not everything is published in Irish at the moment, but most things are at this stage, or a lot of things, more things are being published. So even just looking at the first couple of lines of different journal publications, you kind of get the way that they speak, the language that they use. That's kind of training to get used to the language that could be used for translations or proofreading. And then another thing for proofreading that I practiced was just taking the Kaijon and just reading it, which is just something that I think we all have to do at some stage. Just the things that you're not really sure of, because in fairness, we're really lucky to have it in Irish because not every language has it, and things are really well explained in it. So I think looking at them two sources definitely would be one of the best ways that you could probably train for it in terms of proofreading.
Thanks, Christopher. Look, the questions are coming fast and furious on Slido, and I suppose that's encouraging in one sense because it shows that we have a very engaged, audience who are interested in this topic. However, the clock is beginning to run again, so we will try and pick up on anything that we don't cover today. But maybe, Anne-Claire, there's a couple of questions that, in conclusion, before I say a couple of last remarks, I might throw your way if that's okay. The first is the cast process quicker than the concours? And the second is, what is the indicative planning for the lawyer-linguist competition, especially MCQs?
Yes, I would take this one first. So I think since the application is closed on 23rd of February, I can imagine that you could have the MCQ around probably end of March or April, something like that. And the results of those probably 1 month later. Then maybe the translation test just before the summer, the intermediate test, and the assessment center then probably towards after, well, September, October, something like that. But that's just my guess. So it's to be checked on our website. It will be updated step by step on the page of the competition. So just an idea I have, but I have no information actually. So it's just, I'm guessing compared to the previous competitions. The other question you were asking in terms of cast, well, once you are pre-selected from the database, it goes very fast. It takes less than a month between the moment you are pre-selected and the moment you get your results. The difficulty is to be pre-selected from the database because you can create applications in different fields. You can create 10 applications if you want. If you think you're good in law, in childcare staff, HR, and communication. As a result, the database has become huge. And every month the selection, well, the recruiting services of all the institutions look at their urgent needs and they pre-select a few, but we have no control on that because they do this locally. So let's say DG Communication in the Parliament does their selection, DG or the Court of Justice is looking for a lawyer who is with a specialization in competition law, who speaks Gaelic and German. Let's say they take criteria according to their immediate posts, vacant posts that they need to fill urgently, and then they pre-select someone. And from that they click a button. The week after we invite you. The week after you sit your test, and 2 weeks later you get your results. So it's very fast, but you have to be pre-selected first, and that's the difficulty. And submitting your application doesn't mean you will be selected or pre-selected at all, actually. So I can't really answer this question more precisely than that. Once you're pre-selected, it goes fast, but the time it takes to be pre-selected is impossible to predict.
Thank you. I think at this stage the clock is very much against us, but I wanted to say a sincere thanks to you, Anne-Claire. First of all, wish you well in your new job. I want to thank Jennifer and Christopher sincerely too for sharing with us their experience of working in the institutions, of being in Brussels or Luxembourg as the case may be. And I want to thank my own team here at the Permanent Representation, Aphrodite in particular, for the planning and running of today's event. And finally, I want to thank you all for attending today's webinar. I want to encourage you to attend the others that we have planned later in the year. We're, as we have been emphasizing, willing and able to assist you in terms of applying for EU jobs. Please look at eujobs@dfa.ie if you're thinking of applying for EU jobs, or if you have, see what we have available to you. The deadlines again for the competitions we've been talking about today. The Irish Language Lawyer-Linguist competition is the 23rd of February, and the applications will open for the Irish Language Proofreader competition on the 18th of February. While we focused on those two competitions, of course, we mentioned also that the Court of Justice is also offering great opportunities such as temporary contracts and traineeships. And again, well worth looking into those. In fact, the court is currently looking for lawyer-linguists and translating into Irish with a deadline of the 15th of April, and lawyer-linguists translating into English with no deadline for the applications. And they regularly, as I say, look for trainees. Look, we'll be doing more of these webinars in the future. Follow us on Twitter at EU Jobs Ireland to keep up to date with all our upcoming activities and events. Before we finish today's webinar, I just want to close out by presenting a video which features Michelle Ryan, a lawyer-linguist working for the European Parliament. And this is one of 5 portraits we had commissioned of Irish women working in the institutions, which we timed for St. Bridget's Day this year, which is an important milestone in celebrating Irish women. You can watch the rest of those videos and our past webinars on our YouTube account. And please, again, follow us on the Twitter account, EU Jobs Ireland, to keep up to date. Thank you again. And let's close out by having a look at Michelle in the video. All the best. Bye-bye.
It's funny, the job that I do is one that's quite difficult to explain. My mother still thinks I'm a translator. I'm Michelle Ryan. I'm from Limerick originally, and I am working as a lawyer-linguist in the European Parliament. We're lawyer-linguists, so basically what we do is we try and ensure the quality of the text of legislation, EU legislation. We try and make sure that it means the same legally in each language, each of the official languages. Which means we work off comparison with the English version of the text. Usually you compare your language version with the English version, and you ensure that the legal meaning is going to be the same, because in the court, the plaintiff can rely on they're all equally valid. So if there's discrepancies, you can rely on the one that suits you best. Sometimes I enjoy nothing more than having a day in front of a text. You know, you're screening, you're reading a text and kind of correcting it insofar as you can, putting in comments and questions. But then we also have these really long meetings, as in sometimes the meetings go on for days at a time, you know, maybe 9 hours a day for 3 days in a row, working through a text line by line with maybe 10, 12 of you in the room, and you kind of comment on the text as you go through it and give your advice. Sometimes it can be more policy based, and we can't really contribute so much to that because our job is not to be political in any way. I think that was one of the reasons I was open to moving from Ireland. The job I was in wasn't particularly challenging me. I didn't feel fulfilled in any way. But sometimes you can kind of feel, okay, look, I made a convincing argument today. The text is a little bit better because of something I said. I think I was quite lucky. I was open and ready for a change. And it was really nice because it was my first time ever living alone. I came here and I remember the first weekend, I just moved into my house and I had no furniture, because here you rent and it's unfurnished, and it was bleak. I came home from work on the Friday evening and I didn't have a chair to sit on. I was sitting on the floor. I had no internet. I was trying to steal the neighbor's internet, and I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? This is terrible. This is my life. You know, it took a while and it was definitely scary, but I think someone gave me advice. They said, don't turn down any social invitations in your first few months. And I kind of went with that as a, you know, just to be open to new things. And then gradually you find your little space in the world here.